I'll keep living my best life while he funds it. That's his purpose anyway, my brother smirked. I cut them off financially. Months later, they tried to invade my life. I never thought I'd be the type of person to cut off my entire family. But after a decade of being used as their personal ATM while being treated like an outsider, I finally reached my breaking point. The decision wasn't made in haste or anger. It was the culmination of years of exploitation, disrespect, and the shocking discovery of what they really thought of me. My name is David, a 34-year-old tech company owner who's been working since I was 16. I put myself through college, launched a successful business, and somehow became the financial backbone of my family while my younger brother, Jason, was treated like royalty despite contributing nothing. Growing up, our household operated on clear but unspoken rules. My father, an accountant with perpetually disappointed eyes, pushed me relentlessly toward achievement while viewing Jason through a lens of endless potential and possibility. My mother, always emotionally distant with me, would light up whenever Jason entered the room. I learned early that love in our house was conditional, and the condition for me was success. I started working at 16, stocking shelves at a local grocery store. By 17, I was managing my own small computer repair service out of our garage. College was entirely funded through scholarships and my growing business. While my classmates were enjoying the full college experience, I was answering service calls between classes, often operating on 4 hours of sleep. The pattern of financial support began innocently enough. Dad lost his accounting job during the recession, and I offered to help with a few mortgage payments, just until he got back on his feet. What I didn't realize was that this temporary assistance would become a permanent expectation. Over the years, my financial contributions expanded exponentially. I paid for Jason's first attempt at college business administration, which he abandoned after one semester because it was too rigid for his creative spirit. Then came his second attempt, fine arts, which lasted slightly longer before he decided he wasn't being challenged intellectually. The third attempt, philosophy, cost me $38,000 before he dropped out to find himself through backpacking in Europe. Guess who funded that journey of self-discovery? Beyond my brother's failed endeavors, I covered my parents' mortgage payments, property taxes, car repairs, medical bills, and even home renovations. When my mother wanted a kitchen remodel, I wrote the check. When my father needed dental implants not covered by insurance, I handled it without question. Every family vacation for the past 8 years, trips I was often too busy working to join, came from my bank account. All told, I'd funneled over $320,000 into my family over the past decade. The money itself wasn't even the problem. I could afford it. The problem was the growing sense that my value to them was directly proportional to my financial contributions. At every family gathering, the conversation inevitably turned to my business. "How's work going, David?" Never, "How are you doing, David?" My personal life remained unexplored territory, while Jason's latest hobby or temporary job was discussed with reverent attention. "Jason's considering becoming a craft brewer," my mother would announce proudly, despite his having shown no previous interest in brewing or any willingness to commit to anything requiring consistent effort. My achievements were acknowledged with brief nods before the conversation pivoted to more interesting topics, usually Jason-related. When my company secured a major contract that made local business news, my father's response was, "That's nice. Did you hear Jason is dating a yoga instructor now?" I tried discussing this imbalance several times over the years. My concerns were always dismissed, minimized, or somehow twisted to make me appear selfish. "We're just trying to support Jason because he struggles more than you," my mother would say. "You've always been the independent one," my father would add, as if my self-sufficiency was justification for emotional neglect. Despite the growing resentment, I continued the financial support. Family obligation runs deep, and I told myself this was simply my role, the successful son helping his family. I convinced myself it was normal, that family means sacrifice, that my ability to provide was a blessing rather than a burden. That delusion shattered on a rainy Sunday evening last October. It was our monthly family dinner at my parents' house, a meal I paid for through a standing grocery delivery I'd set up years ago. Usually, I arrived precisely at the agreed time, but that evening I was 20 minutes early due to unusually light traffic. I let myself in with my key and headed toward the kitchen, stopping just outside when I heard my name. "David's just the wallet," my father was saying, his voice carrying the dismissive tone I'd grown accustomed to, but with an edge I'd never heard before. He's reliable but boring as hell. At least he's useful, unlike most boring people. My mother's laugh cut through me like glass. Well, Jason gives us joy. David just gives us money. That's the arrangement, isn't it? Don't worry, Jason's voice replied, lazy and entitled as ever. I'll keep living my best life while David funds it. That's his purpose anyway. They laughed together, the sound hitting me with physical force. I stood frozen, blood rushing to my face, stomach twisting into knots. In those few seconds, 10 years of suspicion crystallized into certainty. I wasn't the dutiful son helping his family through tough times. I was the family ATM, valued only for the resources I provided. I considered turning around and leaving, pretending I'd never heard their true assessment of my place in the family. But something inside me, perhaps the last shred of self-respect I'd been suppressing for years, propelled me forward into the kitchen. The conversation died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, widening with the unmistakable look of people caught in an ugly truth. David, you're early, my mother recovered quickly, her voice rising to an artificial pitch I now recognized as her manipulation voice. The dinner that followed was excruciating. We moved through the familiar rituals, setting the table, serving food I'd paid for, discussing safe topics like neighborhood news and distant relatives. I said little, observing my family with new eyes. The facade was so obvious now. My father's perfunctory questions about work, my mother's practiced smile, Jason's thinly veiled contempt. When my father raised his glass for his customary dinner toast, I felt myself detaching, watching the scene unfold as if from a distance. To family, he said, his voice performatively warm. To Jason, who's exploring exciting new opportunities. Jason had mentioned earlier he was considering becoming a DJ. And to David, our reliable son who always comes through. The wallet, the ATM, the reliable source of funds. I set down my fork with a deliberate motion that somehow silenced the table. When I spoke, my voice was calm, measured, and utterly final. I heard you in the kitchen earlier. I heard exactly what you think of me. The shocked silence confirmed what I already knew. They were aware of precisely what I'd overheard. For 10 years, I've supported this family financially. I've paid for everything from Jason's failed attempts at adulthood to this very meal we're eating, and in return, I'm just the wallet. I'm boring but useful. My mother started to speak, her face contorting into the sympathetic expression she used when preparing to gaslight me. I held up my hand. I'm done, I said simply. I've been your ATM for the last decade. Consider me permanently out of service. I stood, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out the front door. Behind me, I could hear my mother's protests, my father's angry demands to return, Jason's surprised laughter as if this were all an overreaction. I drove home in silence, my phone buzzing continuously with texts and calls I didn't answer. By the time I reached my condo, I'd blocked all their numbers. The next morning, I took a week of personal leave from work, the first vacation time I'd used for myself rather than for family emergencies in years. I met with my financial advisor to untangle the web of support I'd created. The list was staggering. My parents' mortgage had an automatic payment from my account. Their property taxes were linked to my credit card. Jason's apartment rent went directly from my paycheck to his landlord. Even their streaming services and phone bills were in my name. One by one, I severed the financial ties. I closed joint accounts, removed automatic payments, canceled supplementary credit cards, and withdrew my name from every bill. I changed the locks on my condo where they all had keys for emergencies. I canceled the standing grocery delivery to my parents' house. I removed myself as the emergency contact and guarantor on Jason's rental agreement. Each action felt simultaneously like a betrayal and a liberation. The financial separation was the easy part. The emotional aftermath was more complex. Guilt warred with anger, lifelong conditioning battled with fresh determination. The first night after canceling all the accounts, I barely slept, my mind racing with questions. Was I overreacting? Did they really view me that way, or was it just a bad moment I'd caught? What would happen to them without my support? By morning, though, a strange calm had settled over me. For the first time in my adult life, I was prioritizing myself, and the sensation was both foreign and exhilarating. My family's response was exactly what I expected, an escalating campaign of emotional manipulation. First came the confused text messages from my mother sent to my work email since I'd blocked her number. David, there seems to be some problem with the mortgage payment. The bank says it didn't go through. Then my father's angry voicemails left at my office. You're acting like a child. Call us immediately. Jason's approach was more direct. Dude, my rent check bounced. What the hell? When electronic communication failed to produce results, they moved to more direct methods. My mother appeared at my office building 3 days after the dinner, her eyes strategically red from crying, creating a scene in the lobby until security escorted her out. My father left threatening messages about family responsibility and legal obligations. Jason alternated between angry demands and attempts at manipulative reconciliation. Come on, bro, you know how mom and dad are. Don't take it out on me. Extended family members began calling, aunts, uncles, cousins, all with the same message. They're your family, you can't just abandon them. Not one person asked for my side of the story. 2 weeks after cutting ties, I calculated the monthly amount I was saving by no longer supporting my family. $7,200. Looking at that figure was a revelation, not just of the financial burden I'd been carrying, but of the opportunity cost. What could I have done with that money over the past decade? What experiences had I denied myself to fund my brother's string of whims and my parents' comfortable lifestyle? I channeled some of that money into self-improvement. I started seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions of family estrangement. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with because I was always working to maintain my financial obligations. I updated my wardrobe, joined a rock climbing gym, and even booked my first real vacation in 6 years. A 2-week trip to Japan I'd always wanted to take, but could never find the time or justification for. Meanwhile, my business flourished with my renewed focus and energy. Without the constant drain of family demands, I found myself more creative, more engaged, and more effective as a leader. Our quarterly profits increased by 22%, and we expanded into new markets I'd previously been too exhausted to explore. Just as my life was improving, my family's tactics took a darker turn. 3 months after cutting them off, I discovered attempted unauthorized access to my bank accounts. The attempts originated from an IP address I recognized, my parents' home computer. A week later, I received notifications about credit card applications submitted in my name with my old address listed as the residence. When I checked my credit report, I found 3 recent hard inquiries I hadn't authorized. The invasion escalated when I spotted my father's car parked outside my office building multiple times. Then Jason began showing up at restaurants and bars I frequented, claiming coincidence while trying to engage me in conversation that inevitably turned to family finances. I started varying my routines, using different exits from my building, and being more cautious about sharing my location on social media. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening in February, 4 months after I'd cut ties. I returned home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, my family had made themselves comfortable in my living room, my father in my favorite chair, my mother arranging food she'd prepared on my dining table, Jason sprawled on my couch scrolling through his phone. "What are you doing in my home?" I asked, my voice steady despite the violation I felt. My mother's response was chilling in its disconnect from reality. "We're just checking on you, David. We're worried about you. You haven't been yourself lately." My father stood, his posture aggressive. "This has gone on long enough. You have responsibilities to this family that you're neglecting." Jason didn't even look up from his phone. "Dude, you need to get over yourself. Mom's been crying for weeks." That's when I noticed my desk had been disturbed, drawers left open, papers rearranged. My financial documents were spread out, and my laptop showed signs of attempted access. Without a word, I took out my phone and called the police. My mother's face crumpled in disbelief as I calmly reported a break-in. My father's expressions cycled rapidly from anger to disbelief to calculation. Jason finally put down his phone, his face paling as he realized the seriousness of the situation. "You'd call the police on your own family?" my mother whispered, tears forming, tears I now recognized as tactical rather than emotional. I simply nodded, maintaining eye contact until she looked away. The police arrived within minutes. I explained the situation, unauthorized entry using a key they must have copied, attempted access to financial information, ongoing harassment following my decision to cease contact. The officers were professional but clear. My family had no right to enter my home without permission, regardless of their relationship to me. As they were escorted out, my father turned back with one final threat. "You can't survive without family. You'll regret this." For the first time, I felt no guilt, no doubt, no hesitation. "I've survived despite this family, not because of it," I replied. The next day, I filed for an emergency restraining order against all three family members, documenting the break-in, the attempted financial fraud, and the pattern of escalating harassment. I provided evidence, emails, voicemails, security footage from my building showing their unauthorized visits, credit monitoring reports showing the fraudulent applications. The temporary order was granted immediately, with a court date set for a permanent order. I hired a security company to change my locks and install a comprehensive security system. I worked with a specialized attorney to place fraud alerts on all my accounts and file identity theft reports. I moved most of my banking to new accounts at different institutions. I sent formal cease and desist letters through my attorney, copies of the restraining order included. My family's response to legal consequences was to escalate their smear campaign. Through mutual connections, I learned they were telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned them, that I was mentally unstable, that my success had changed me. They portrayed themselves as victims of my cruelty rather than as architects of their own predicament. I remained silent, letting the legal process speak for me. When the court date arrived for the permanent restraining order, they didn't even show up to contest it, perhaps recognizing the evidence against them was overwhelming. The judge granted a 3-year order prohibiting any contact or proximity. The months that followed brought profound changes. I moved to a new apartment in a secure building with no connection to my previous address. I changed my phone number and email addresses. I took my social media accounts private and carefully vetted connection requests. I warned my employees about potential contact from my family and implemented stricter security protocols at work. The financial and emotional freedom I experienced was transformative. Without the constant drain of supporting 3 additional adults, my savings grew rapidly. I expanded my business, hired new talent, and explored opportunities I'd previously considered too risky. My therapist noted the physical changes, improved posture, reduced tension, healthier sleep patterns, all signs of diminishing stress. 6 months after the restraining order, I received an email that had somehow bypassed my filters. It was from my mother, using an address I didn't recognize. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation, hitting all the familiar notes. "We've always loved you more than you knew. Family forgives. We're struggling without you. Your father's health is declining. Jason misses his big brother." Notably absent was any acknowledgement of what they'd done, any genuine apology, or any indication they understood why I'd cut contact. It was the same emotional script they'd always used, just with higher stakes. For a brief moment, ingrained guilt resurfaced. Then I remembered their words in the kitchen that rainy Sunday. "David's just the wallet." I remembered the violated feeling of finding them in my apartment, going through my financial information. I remembered decades of emotional neglect paired with financial exploitation. I forwarded the email to my attorney to document the violation of the restraining order, then composed a brief, final response. "I've discovered that family isn't defined by blood but by respect and love. You provided neither. Do not contact me again." I blocked the new email address and strengthened my digital barriers. Through a former colleague who still had connections with my parents' neighbors, I learned about their current situation. My father had taken a part-time accounting job to supplement his retirement, his first regular work in nearly a decade. My mother had downsized her shopping habits and social activities. Most surprisingly, Jason had maintained an entry-level position at a local brewery for almost 4 months, a record for him. They had adjusted to life without their ATM. As for me, the journey from exploitation to liberation continued to unfold in unexpected ways. I found myself more capable of authentic connections, more discerning about relationships, more aware of subtle manipulation tactics. I built a circle of chosen family, friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The business expanded into 3 new states. I took quarterly vacations. I started dating someone who knew nothing about my family history until I was ready to share it, and who responded with understanding rather than pressure to reconcile. Looking back now, I realize I spent my entire adult life buying affection that was never real, paying for approval that was always conditional, funding a family system that classified me as useful but not beloved. The revelation hurt, continues to hurt sometimes, but the pain is outweighed by the peace I've found in choosing myself. Sometimes people ask if I miss my family. The honest answer is complicated. I miss the family I thought I had. I miss the relationships I imagined were developing through my sacrifice and support. I miss the approval I was perpetually working toward but never quite earning. But those were fantasies. I don't miss the reality, the exploitation, the disrespect, the fundamental imbalance. I've learned that walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest choice you can make. I've learned that guilt can be a prison, and obligation without reciprocity is just another word for servitude. I've learned that some relationships cannot be fixed because the other party sees nothing wrong with the arrangement. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the greatest peace. By closing the door on those who viewed me as nothing more than a financial resource, I opened new doors to authentic connection, self-respect, and a life unburdened by endless, thankless sacrifice. The family ATM is permanently out of service, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm truly free.